All right. Happy Friday, everybody. And well, this is a different one for those of you who have followed this for a while. My live streams are normally just me. So if you're like, what is this going on? We got a second person in the group. I'm excited to have a guest with me, and I may do this every once in a while because it's kind of fun. But I am live again, not doing my usual rundown and Q&A on my podcast topics. But it is related to the topic. I'm joined by Travis Hahler, and he's going to introduce himself here. But we're going to be talking about, if you didn't catch the podcast this week, I talked about how the AI Agent Sprawl is at hand. And it's everywhere, and it is doing all sorts of things all over the place. And that has financial implications. It has organizational implications. But one of the big things that my Substack article is about next week is the implications on people as we think about our human agency and what we're giving up. And to join me, it made sense to have Travis do this for two reasons. One, he's got a book coming out next week talking about the brain science behind change. But largely, a lot of these problems are the result of poor change management. And we're not taking into account how people handle change. And we're just letting them figure it out, which, Travis, I think you would agree is not usually the best way to handle change, is just to say, here we go. But with that, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Chris, and glad to be here. Travis Hahler. So I am the founder of the Neurological Nomad, and I'm Senior Director of Strategy and Transformation at Salesforce. So I work in change and the people side of change every single day. As Chris mentioned, my book, Rethink Resistance, comes out next week on Tuesday. We'll get into probably a little bit of the brain science here, Chris, but there's so much to go through and uncover as we chat.
Well, so let's talk about this topic in general, because if anybody who listened to the podcast this week knows, I talked about the fact that there's actually a term for what's happening with AI agents right now, and it's called the agent sprawl. And it's because in this flurry of change, we didn't quite get the impact we were looking for with just generative AI. So we were like, oh no, how do we do more? And everybody said, I know, agents. And so every company spun out agents and said, yeah, just agentize everything, whatever that means, and told everybody, now go do it. And people did. But when you just say, here's a thing, go do it, they end up either not doing it or doing it in ways that you never expected. And so these agents are running absolute chaos in organizations as they're doing what they're instructed, just at a speed and level that we've never seen before. And so I'm curious, because you're at the center of this kind of business change, what are some of the implications, or I mean, where do you see some of this coming from? Because I'm obviously looking at this very much through a technology and a people lens, but you're looking at this also at a macro change lens. And are you seeing some of these same patterns?
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting. To your point, it started generative AI, and then all of a sudden it was agentic AI, and
we didn't even take a
breath. There was no second between. It was like bang and bang. They were right there. Yes. They were available. So people, I don't know that people understood sometimes the difference in what they were setting up and how it worked. And then you all of a sudden had the generative AI LLMs adding in agentic elements that weren't actual agents, but they operated in certain agentic ways. So it's gotten really confusing for so many people. So that's the first thing, Chris. Like, the first thing that we really have to talk about is the fact that people fundamentally don't understand when to use each one of those and what they do. And I think that's the core of the problem. And in working in kind of my area, a lot of what we're doing is educating as well as directing people to help them understand kind of what's expected, how they play with it, how they interact with it. And I don't think that we've done that super well as as society, as these things have come out. And that is really creating, I think, some of the sprawl, because people are spinning up things that like don't need maybe that level of AI support. And I liken it to probably Claude and like Claude Cowork, the difference between those two things, right? A lot of people have adopted Cowork, which uses quite a bit more of your usage. But they're using it to ask it questions. Like, they're using it to ask questions like, hey, help me think through something. And that's actually more of a Claude, just strict LLM question versus a cowork question, where the cowork would be, I need you to do a task.
As well.
Yes. Yes.
Well, and so I think it's interesting because to break this down, I mean, I've spent many years in kind of the human performance lens. And so you're looking at this through kind of the cognitive psychology side of this. But I think there is this fundamental understanding, because if you ask most people, do you understand generative AI? A lot of people will say, yeah, I understand. As in, like, I've used it. There is this fundamental difference between I know how to do it, as in, like, I can prompt it, I ask it questions, I maybe do things. But even on a basic level, like, I spend a lot of time even educating people on, do you understand even how LLMs are built, to understand like the training phase versus the actual model that you're interacting with, and how those things work. And a lot of people are like, I just thought it did a thing. And so there is this massive cognitive divide of people's level of misunderstanding around what the tech is and what it does.
And I think that's huge, Chris. Honestly, like and I know we've all had a lot of training, and like at Salesforce, as an example, I mean, we've been doing a lot of training around, what is the AI kind of agentic enterprise that we're building. And I think we've done a very good job of helping people understand it, but we're a tech company and that's what we do, right? Like that's our bread and butter. So we should be able to do that well. But when I think about how people are looking at generative AI, what's interesting to me and what I hear people talk about, and I feel like there's like 85 books that could be written on this, but when I hear people talk about it, they liken it to a thinking brain, which is not wrong in terms of like the way that they're thinking about it, in terms of like that is yes, there is something running that,
like kind of like it's in the neural networks, and
so there's enough like overlap that like I see how it makes sense. But the problem with that is it completely gets to a very weird place in how people understand the way it works, to your point, because the way that our brain works is that we're using context to think of a response, and then that response is built from that context.
Yes.
The LLM is actually providing information based on probabilities, based on the context, based on the previous word, not based on context as this sentence, then that sentence.
As in lived experience. It doesn't know what it right.
No.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It has
so
zero
each word
idea
gets less probable, but it has like very probable words that it will use, and then it will string it together with the most probable words that make sense within it, and based on whatever the context is and whatever you fed it. So it's not thinking, quote unquote, like a brain does. It's using predictive, I would say, analytic pattern recognition to build what it is giving you. So it's a very different thing, which is why, I think
but it sounds like us. And I think that's the part that really it sounds like us. So we're like, well, I've been told it's trained on all the information in the world. I've been told that it, is smarter than 1,000 PhDs. I've been told all these things. It can do anything. And it kind of talks like a person, and it kind of sounds like somebody. And boy, over time, it kind of sounds like me a little bit, and it's very affirming. And those, like you said, those things are really hard for people to break apart in their head, especially if they don't fully understand what they're dealing with. I mean, it does mess with the psyche. It really does. And we're seeing that. I'm seeing that in data everywhere, that it is messing with people's heads.
If you go into like the like psychology aspects of it, I think it was last year, Better Up does their conference every year. And they were talking about how in their research, it was like 90% of people were more comfortable talking to AI about their problems, issues, concerns than they were talking to an actual therapist. But what was really interesting was that it was still a very large percentage still wanted a person or trusted the person more than the AI. But that just tells you how much more people are willing to interact with the AI over anything else.
Number one use case in, I think, 2025 was therapy. Number one use case in 2026 is therapy, which like you said, there's this disconnect in that the way I talk about it a lot, and sometimes people don't like this or they'll argue, is I'm like, it gives you what you want. But on a complicated level, because I'll get people who get really feisty about it. They go, "Nuh-uh," because I asked it this and it didn't. I'm like, but see, the problem is it knew what you wanted. It knew it wanted you to disagree with it because of the way you word. Like it sensed the pattern behind the way you structured the question and the pattern of the conversation you were having. And so it was like, yeah, okay. You want me to tell you like you're an idiot? I'll tell you you're an idiot so that you feel better about your dominance over AI, because secretly that's what you want. You want me to call you an idiot so that you feel superior to me. Like but it's just looking at these patterns. It's not like consciously thinking this, right. But it messes with people on a really deep level and I mean, I think I have to argue with you that like getting everything you want in the moment is not inherently a good thing. I can think back to plenty of times where the idea I had right now, I'm thankful that it didn't happen for me.
Well, and Chris, I know you and I have talked about this just personally before, but I think that gets to the point of the usage and how we and the agency part of this conversation, which is that it, and again, Travis's opinion of the world and what LLMs are great at and what generative AI is good at and agentic AI is good at. It's good at helping you do something once you've made a decision to do something.
Yes.
It is not what you should be using to tell you what the decision needs to be. And I think that's how we're outsourcing so much of the work. And you know, I've described to you situations where I've been in rooms where great conversation is happening, and then someone pulls up an LLM and says, "What should we do?" And the conversation dies. And the problem is that, not saying that what it actually gives you is wrong. It could absolutely be right. But the problem is we lose the conversation about why we've committed to that. And that neurologically is so important as we go through change, is that commitment and that group commitment that we're moving forward with something. We're losing that in those moments. And we're allowing the LLM to just be our committed thing that makes our decision.
Well, and I just think about all the work I've done in leadership and how when you have a personal stake in a decision, you are more committed to it. I mean, it's just because you played a role in it. And I continue to see a greater divide between accountability and responsibility, which the gap just keeps growing, where it's like, I want more responsibility, but I want to be less accountable for what I do when I'm in that role. And AI only further divides that, because you go, well, that's the decision Claude made or, you know, Copilot made. And so if it works, great. If it doesn't, I'm not really all that into it. And it does. It sucks the air out of the room when you're having a great conversation and somebody goes, well, here, let's just see what Claude has to say on this type of thing. But to your point, it's not that it's wrong or bad. It's just we continue to use it wrong. And I think the part that I'm talking about more next week on Substack as it relates to this agency, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, is even going back to, if you already think you know what you're doing and you use AI, you're in a better spot, which I agree. Better there than just going, I don't know, AI, like, what do you think? Here's my situation. Tell me what my options are. However, I feel like what often happens is we don't even necessarily realize how much it's influencing us, and we're handing over agency, even the more we start doing our brainstorming with it. Like, we don't even come to it with an idea and we're like, I'm thinking of doing a podcast, or I'm thinking of writing a LinkedIn post. What should I write about? Let's brainstorm some ideas based on popular. We don't realize that, like, we are handing over agency to AI to go, tell me what I should care about. Tell me what I should talk about. But we don't see it that way, because we're like, well, I told it I wanted this. It's like, but you didn't. And it subtly shaped what you decided to think about in ways that you might not even notice.
Well, you know, it's interesting because this gets this isn't the first time this has happened in our lifetimes, right? Not in a long shot. So if we go back, the last probably big thing that happened like this was when search engines started deciding what the results were going to be based on popularity or based on like kind of their interpretation of what the best result would be. And now, you know, when you search on a search engine, I can't even remember what the stat is, but like the first page is essentially whatever either has been kind of paid for or promoted, or, you know, the ones that have worked with the optimization to make sure that they're front and center, right? So if you take that and you zoom out even further and you look at where we are with this agentic and AI age that we're in, you're outsourcing the ideation to AI. AI is utilizing search engines and those neural networks to determine what information is coming to you. And it's also
based on what's already the most popular.
Based on what's already the most popular things. So AI is actually filtering even further based on probably promoted, paid for, and the most popular things, and then bringing that to you. So to your point, if we're looking at, hey, we need to be innovative and different, and we need to think how we can move a company or move a product or whatever that is. If you're asking AI is just bringing you what everyone else is doing in the most popular way that they're doing it. So is it really innovative? It might be different than you're doing it today, but is it innovative? And I don't think that the answer to that question is yes in most cases.
Well, and I think that fundamentally hits on one of these traps that we can often run into as people, which is that activity is the same thing as productivity. You know, that it's like, if we're in motion, we're doing something valuable. And it's like, not necessarily. I mean, I just even think of like exercise. Just because you're exercising doesn't mean you're getting healthier. In fact, you might be injuring yourself if you're doing it wrong. And the same thing is true like with this stuff, where it's like, okay, so maybe this isn't the way we do this today. And AI presented a fundamentally radically different way because that's the pop trend right now to do this crazy thing. And so it's like, hey, you should do that. And you go, wow, that is wildly different than we've ever done it before. We should totally do that. And AI says it's a banger of an idea. Well, yeah, you might spin up millions, billions of dollars doing stuff that is literally rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. And you're like, what if we put them on the aft of the boat? Wouldn't that be great? Like, oh, it would, because then we wouldn't see the water rushing into where the iceberg tore it out. You're like, you're still sinking though. Like, do you not fundamentally see that's what you are? But our brains don't always pick up on that.
Absolutely. And the other part is that in order for something to be innovative or new or different, it by nature bucks usually popular demand and popular sentiment. You know, the old adage, which is, if you had asked, you know, if Henry Ford would have asked what people wanted, they would have said faster horses.
Faster horses.
And so like, if you're asking AI what people want and what you should be investing in, it's probably the same things that have been driving to this point. It's not going to tell you, hey, this is a secret that no one else knows. I'm going to give it to you because I'm thinking about it. Here's the new innovative thing that you should invest in because it's new and different. It's going to say, here are the things that we're seeing. Here are the trends we're seeing. Here's what the most popular opinions are saying here. Like that's what's going to give you. It's not going to your point, it's not going to give you that thing that's out there that humans come up with at the end of the day, humans. And that's why we talk so much about this human agent or human AI like partnership. How does you cannot lose the human side of this. And I think we're outsourcing the things that at times are what make us the most human, when we should be outsourcing the things that we actually replicate machinery to do. Right. And that but that takes a lot less thought, right? So it takes a lot less thought for me to quick bang through 85 emails than it does for me to try to think up a brand new strategy and way of operating and all. Like, that takes a lot of thought. And then I think this comes back to the neuroscience bit. Like, that's also part of the resistance that we see And one of the foundations of resistance is truly the amount of energy that your prefrontal cortex uses when you're thinking logically, executively, innovatively. That is a lot of energy and taxing on your brain. And so that creates that resistance. And I think that's why people so quickly were like, oh, AI can do this? Great.
Perfect.
I'm going to just get the things done that my boss or my manager is like on me all the time, like my timesheets and my expenses and my this and my that.
Yep.
And I'm going to let it come up with our new op model. And then I'll put that into the deck when we're done. Like, that's what we're outsourcing. But that's
so I
want
to talk about this a little more, because I think this is an important one. But before we do, to close off on this, because I always hear the people who are I always hear the people who argue with me in the back of my head, going back to the whole like, well, it's just going to give you the most popular thing. And this again is where I'll hear people go, see, but I'm smarter than that because I tell it not to do that. And so it gives me a thing that's very different. And I'm like, exactly. So it literally went and manufactured, and that's where you see more of this hallucination. I don't like the term hallucination, because it's like there's no such thing as a hallucination. If you understand how these things are built, going back to like we said, it's like a blender. It's just taking what it thinks the ingredients you want in your smoothie are, and then just and then pouring it out the way you want it. And so if you go, give me an idea that's crazy, it'll be like, I don't know, peanut butter and shoelaces. Like, and you're like, here you go. And you're like, wow, that is radically different than what I've ever heard. And again, our brain, our little neurons start firing off and the dopamine hits, because we're like, did you hear? I got a shoelace and I got a shoelace and pineapple sandwich that I just made. And you're like, why did you think that was a good idea? Because I said, give me something different. And it said, you want different, baby. Here's different. And we get really excited about it because we go, well, boy, we've never had that before. That is different. What do you think? And because we're just so hyped on it, it's really easy to fall into this. And this is how these kind of psychological tricks work on people all the time. You see this with snake oil salesmen, and whatever, where it's been like, hey, drink this serum and you'll grow 6 inches. And you're like, wow, I hadn't ever thought of that as a way to grow 6 inches. So but
easy.
Right.
I love that.
Wow. Yeah. Right. I can lose weight and I don't have to exercise, and I can still eat Doritos and M&Ms 3 days a week. All I got to do is take this pill. Like, wow, I love it. And I think we sometimes like to go, yeah, but I would never do that. Like, psychologically, we go, but I'm not that way. But I think we are all much more vulnerable to that than we realize. And AI is really good at detecting
1000%.
What's going to get under your radar, because I can see the patterns that you want, and I can kind of tell what you want, and I learn how to say it in a way that you go, interesting. That is actually, it's not going to offer you a peanut butter and shoelace sandwich, because it'll be like, well, they're not going to fall for that one.
And this is I feel like we're just continuing the conversation, but this is also where it gets interesting, because what is truly interesting about when you're putting things into AI, and something that I only probably know enough about to be dangerous, but your language, whether you realize it or not, is influencing it significantly. And so the more you write, the more you put, the more of your opinion you put into it, the more it detects what you want to hear, or what you're thinking, or the route you're already going down. And so it's, to your point, it's going to validate you immensely. And this is where, this is where the like my background in doing organization-wide like sentiment surveys comes in a little bit, because I'm like, okay, I truly need the LLM to not be influenced. So I need to write this in a way that is as neutral as humanly possible, so that it can't detect which direction I want it to go, which is kind of how we determine those like enterprise-wide, survey questions, to say, you don't say, did you think this was a good idea?
Right.
No, you just told them that maybe.
How happy are you with your job right now on a scale of 1 to 5? Like,
exactly.
How happy am I?
Yeah, exactly. Would you say you're unhappy right now? Well, I wasn't, but now I kind of am. Like, now I kind of think I might be.
it is funny. I mean, we laugh about it, but this is also, I think, one of our greatest vulnerabilities. Because yes, are there ways you can get around this? Yes. And a lot of the work I do is trying to help people understand, like, okay, it doesn't mean fear the machine, be afraid of what it does. Like, you can work around it. You can use it in a way that it has less influence, but you can't in isolation, because if you're in a vacuum, I mean, we all know what the Dunning-Kruger effect does to people. You're just like, wow, I'm a genius. You know, this thing is great. I'm very confident in what it did. But it's also this understanding of the self-awareness of your own vulnerabilities. Because, I mean, the second I hear somebody go, I'm not fooled by AI, I'm like, I can bet if I look at your chat history, you are very influenced by AI, by the very fact you insist you are never influenced by anything.
It's like saying you're not influenced by ads.
Right.
Like, we all are.
Ads don't do anything to me.
Yeah. Like the I promise you, at one point you clicked on one and bought something, or you saw it and then 3 days later bought that thing or something very similar to it. Like, it is very, very good at, I don't want to say manipulating, but influencing you to do the thing that you kind of already want to do. Like that new pair of shoes, right? You're like, I kind of was wanting a new pair of shoes. I wasn't ready to pull the trigger, but now I saw 18 ads and actually I'm kind of like invested in the new shoe game right now.
Yeah. And like, I really like those shoes, because those ones actually, it really did tailor those to me in a way. But we then go back to, we'll reverse engineer how we were the ones in charge. And I think that's one of the things that I talk about a lot with us losing our agency is we will go out of our way to convince ourselves, no, I'm not doing it. I actually still am in charge. It's like, let me see your chat history. And you will quickly see that it's like, you're not. And the fact you don't see it is actually the most concerning part, which again goes back to this agent sprawl. But I'm curious with this, because what we were about to jump to was how, and this is the interesting part, in that one of the pieces of research I was involved in recently talked about how one of the areas people are using AI the most is to do the things they hate, which isn't always the best things to do. And one of the things you talked about is, as much as people say, I'm a strategist, I love being a strategist, like I don't like to do the day-to-day stuff. Actually, a lot of times we do, because the churning through emails or doing the things that don't require any thinking, you know, you just kind of do it. It's relaxing, or there's like a sense of accomplishment. It's not, you talked about how our prefrontal cortex just requires so much energy when we actually have to think through like big, complicated, messy things. And in a world right now that feels like every day you're waking up and going, oh my gosh, like I have to reprocess the world that I'm living in right now. Many people are tired. And I see this all the time in people where they're almost just like zombies, where there's like, I don't even care anymore. I don't have time or energy to do it. If I can get to work and get out of the day with the end of my inbox being empty and I made it home safe, like, fine, I'm still employed. And I think that also makes us more vulnerable. And I'm curious if you're seeing some of those same things and the implications of that.
Oh, absolutely. And Chris, what's interesting is that, you know, the things that we're outsourcing. So if we think about kind of the way that our brain works, we're kind of dopamine machines, right?
Yes.
Like the dopamine is our drug of choice. Like, and we love it. Like we do. Our brains love it. We love it. Makes us feel good, right? So we're just always looking for the next kind of dopamine hit. But what happens in your day-to-day is the things that are more quick hits versus long-term hits of that dopamine. And so if you look at kind of the example you were just giving, like sometimes just getting through your inbox, each of those emails going out, you're like, it's just a little bit, but it's just enough to make me feel real good about myself and really good about
productive.
Really productive. I get a little bit of it. And then now what's happening is the harder things that we are outsourcing to AI in some cases, like the strategizing, the like, tell me about this. How should we go about that? What's really interesting is that that's more of a longer term dopamine. Like every time that you're like finding the next rock to uncover, you're getting more and more and more. But because we're outsourcing it, we actually get a really big dopamine hit when we go back to the AI as we're like going through our emails and like our AI is going on the side, like we're doing our thing, and then it's like, oh, bing, done. And then you look over and you're like, perfect. You actually get that same dopamine hit that like at the very end where you're like, great, it's done. Perfect.
Right.
Like, so
yeah,
there's no cognitive, I mean, you are ultimately losing some of that like dopamine build, but there's really no cognitive consequence to using it, because it's still also giving you that little bit of dopamine hit, feeling of accomplishment, feeling done with it. You're like, oh, that gets it off my plate. That's so easy. Like I would have had to spend so much time doing that. And so it kind of reinforces it as we start to do that more and more and more. And then we're like, well, this is great. Like these are all just accomplishment. And there's no current consequence. Now, I think we're probably not too far away from some of that consequence becoming real, right? Like right now we're kind of accepting
the cracks in the foundation are rapidly
blowing
out.
Pretty soon folks are going to start asking the questions pretty predominantly about like, well, how did you use AI to get this? Like if you used AI, how did you use it? Because I need to know if this is like the LLM spit this out and it's garbage and I need to know that, or is this like we truly were using it as a partner to help us like to help do the research, right? Like that an amazing tool. I think I was telling you a couple of weeks ago about, you know, using it to find researched peer-reviewed information that then you can go and say, oh, I'm going to dig further into that. Like if that's how you're using it, wonderful. That's
so long
great.
As you're doing that second part.
As long as you're doing the second part, right?
Yeah.
So I think we're going to have to show our work, quote unquote, a lot more in the coming days, weeks, months, years than we've ever had to before. And I'm very curious how that's going to go with people, because there's a lot of people that are like, I don't know how I got to this actually.
Well, and the thing is, you know, because it's one of the things I get into a lot of conversations, because one of the things that I don't think is helpful right now is there's like the AI shaming, you know, where everybody, you know, like, I know how we'll get around this. We'll make people feel like crap if they used AI. And I'm like, that is not the solution to guilt and shame people into it. And people are like, well, yeah, you know, we have AI detectors that detect if things are, and I'm like, it was trained. Once again, you don't understand how AI was built. It was built on data created by humans. So what it generates looks like humans, and it's designed to get better and better at doing that. Your generators and your detectors, they're picking up on patterns that, okay, fine, but all you got to do is wait until the latest trend goes out. Don't put this in your writing because AI will think it's, you know, and then people are like, oh, let's just move the pattern. And suddenly the M dash dies and everybody thinks we somehow hacked the system.
I was just going to say, should I get on my soapbox about the M dash for a second? Because nothing makes me angrier, and I'll do the short version. So as someone who wrote a book and was doing this during the time of like AI blowing up and becoming used for all the things, you became hyper fixated on like, oh shoot, what are the things that people are assuming are AI? And as you like pull back the layers of that, and the M dash is one of them, right? Like the minute you see an M dash, everyone's like, oh, AI. Well, the M dash
without any thought.
Without any thought, they're like, that's AI, that's AI, that's AI.
Yep.
But if you go back to how the LLM was first actually trained, it was on classic literary writing.
Literature. Yep.
Literature uses the M dash all the time. It is the proper way of doing it. And so what the LLM is doing is actually giving you properly literary written work, but now we associate it with AI because we just don't use the M dash as a casual thing. It's for formal writing. It's for writing books. It's for writing literary work. And so because we don't use it casually, we assume that anything that does use it is AI. Now, argument could be made also that the casual places where you are seeing the M dash show up is probably AI in some way influenced, right? But the M dash by itself is not an AI indicator. And so like, it's just, again, it's those little things that, well, it's not this, but that. It wasn't this, but it was that. those are ways that we talk.
That was mine, because I've always done that. I'm always like, well, we're not talking about this. It's more like, and people are like, see, AI. I'm like, I've been talking that way forever. I'm an educator. I talk about how comparisons to help people ground it into something. And like, but I think this goes back to what we said about, I think we are getting to a point. And one of the things people go, well, fine, if we can't use AI detectors, what do we do? I'm like, ask follow-up questions. Ask follow-up questions. If the person looks like a deer in headlights after you go, why do you think that? And they just go, okay, that's a problem. Like, if suddenly you hear the keyboard clicking when you ask a follow-up question, that's probably an indicator you should be more concerned about what was said, rather than I saw an M dash and you did a this versus that comparison type of a thing. But I think, going back to it, this also goes into that, how AI is influencing and changing the way that we think and the way we make decisions, because we go, I would have accepted this really good thought, but now I don't, because it says an M dash, and therefore I disagree with it. And you're like, assess the quality of what was said. Stop. But I think this goes back to probably one of our greatest vulnerabilities. And I think, I'm curious your take on this from a psychology standpoint. And I think this is one of the hard parts with assessing what it means to be, bring out the best version of people and things like that, which is, we don't really have good measures for what good looks like. And that's a huge problem, because we don't actually measure things based on any sort of consistent standard. It's whatever feels good in the moment. And so if I like what you said, it's good. If I don't like what you said, and boy, you added an M dash to it, well, then I don't care if you just said gravity is real. If I don't like gravity and you wrote gravity is real with an M dash, I'm going to reject it, even if I literally just watched something fall out of the sky. And I think that's something that we are extremely vulnerable to right now. And I see this in organizations, because a lot of organizations don't have clear ways of saying, okay, you want to do this transformation. What do you want to see on the other side? What would good look like? And a lot of times those aren't answered, and it's different. And you're like, different? Different is your measure for success? Like, that's not a great measure. And I think going back to what we've talked about this dopamine hit, if we're not really careful, that quickly becomes what we accept.
Yeah. Yeah, it's absolutely true, Chris. And I think like what's really interesting, and I don't have all the research on this, and probably the research doesn't quite exist yet, because it's something that's been happening relatively recently, is I think people are really quick to reject things that seem easy to reject, because we're so inundated by in this world of so much content, one, and two, that we live in a world right now that for, I don't know, the last 10 years, there's been this movement of, fake news, whether it's fake or not. Right. And so I think as a society, as people, we're getting really quick to discredit or dismiss things, because there's just so much, and there's just so much that we're like, to your point, my brain, as I'm scrolling through my news feed or whatever, I might see the thing that says gravity is real, but it has an M dash, and I might dismiss it and say, well, that's AI. I don't need to read that, because my brain is focused on, like, I just read something that's really startling from a very, very good source, but I have a hard time accepting that that's true. And now your brain is trying to process that. And so you're kind of saying, like, get everything else out of here that doesn't seem like it needs the space, because I want to give that the space. And so I think that's, people are really quick to dismiss things if they can, because there's just so much.
Well, it goes back to kind of that psychological tendency in us to just, if it makes us uncomfortable, if it challenges something, if it pushes against where we already are, we're hyper resistant, and then we'll reverse engineer why the reason we did that was actually really a good thing. Well, it was clearly because it was AI. It was clearly because it came from this. It was clearly, this or that, or and then we think we're really smart, and then we'll go to AI and go, this is right. And then it'll be like, you're right. And then we're like, see, well, there you go. See, AI researched it, and it told me exactly what I already thought. And you're like, you're making this problem even worse for yourself.
Yeah. Well, psychologically, I mean, we seek out validation, right? And that's why, again, you look at the world today, and we have more access to the world than we've ever had, right? We have more access to see groups of people that exist than we've ever had, whether that's social media, it's news, it's whatever it is. We just have access to see so many different facets of humans. And it's interesting how, you can see something and say, gosh, how is it that they believe that? Like, there's a group of people that probably think gravity isn't real, and they probably exist somewhere, but it's because that group of people has surrounded themselves with other people that think just like them, and they will absolutely believe to the end of time that they are correct because they have this group of people that will validate that perspective and agree with that perspective. And that's why when sometimes you see things like that, you're like, well, how in the world do they think that? But it's because when you surround yourself with people that think exactly like you or agree with you 100% of the time, you believe that to be extremely true. And that's what you trust, right? Well, so psychologically, that's important for us.
Well, and humans. I think it has a compounding effect in that tribalism then creates a state where you don't want to go against the tribe because you don't want to risk being kicked out of the tribe. And so then it becomes well, now, even if I'm starting to question or I don't agree with all of these things, I'm afraid to question or disagree with some of these things out of the consequences that I may suffer if I don't go along for the ride. And in many ways, and I'm curious your take on this, in many ways, I actually think this is what amplifies the vulnerability we have right now to AI, because people are messy. Like, there's no denying it. Like, they are messy. People are hard to deal with. They're frustrating. Like, even the person who is most like you, that you like and you think you could spend forever with, pisses you off on a regular basis. Like, it's frustrating. Like, you have miscommunications, things break down.
Well, we're terrible communicators is what it comes down to.
Right. Well, it's a lot of things. But I think this amplifies it because now AI offers an even better solution than what tribalism did. Because now it was like, well, even tribalism had its flaws because, boy, sometimes I don't like the way the tribe goes, and they kind of treat me like a jerk when I have my own ideas or when I ask a question about their ideas. Suddenly it's like, wow, AI, if it argues with me, I can say, stop arguing with me and tell me I'm a genius, and it'll do it. And it's like, oh, okay, well, and so we just continue going down this path. And I think that's something that we really have to be careful of, especially in the cultural waters we're swimming in right now.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think it's very much, even though, to your point, the tribe might have been messy, there were still aspects of it that challenged you as a person, and something that you couldn't control. There was no off button, right? And even then, there's still growth there. There's still challenging to your perspective, the way you think. Like you said, even the person that agrees with you on almost everything still disagrees with you on something, right?
Yep.
And so there's still a bit of disagreement, and disagreement's extremely important for us to think and be critical about our thinking and challenge ourselves. So it provides that kind of second path that can be kind of scary.
It can be scary. And I think, Keith brought up a good question, which like totally covers my face on the vertical one. But I think he's on to this whole point where we just have to be really careful of this. Because like he said, like, people who are anti-AI will believe a person, even if what the person says is just insane, over AI, because it's like, well, I don't trust AI. AI is wrong. It hallucinates. It does all these things. And you're like, right, but measure what it said. Is it correct? And I think his point that I think is going to be the difference and one of the keys, because I do like to focus also on solutions, because sometimes it's easy to get so wrapped up in these things that you're like, wow, sounds like this sucks and we're doomed. Like, we just want validation. We can't get along. AI is going to give us what we want. And there are days that definitely it can feel like we're cooked as a people. But then I do see things where, I see people who are starting to wake up to this a little bit and go, I don't like where we're going. And one of the things that I'm curious from kind of the psychology side is what helps encourage things like curiosity? What helps things? Because Keith mentioned it. Ego is a big part of it. Ego is a big part of it. Our hubris, I mean, what's the saying? Like, pride always comes before the fall. The more we just think, I can't be wrong, I'm smart, I have the answers, all these things, everyone else is an idiot. That's a great way to land yourself in a whole heap of trouble. But humility is hard. Being humble is hard. Like, it's hard to be like, I might be wrong. This other person might know more than I do. I may say something that is not what I really intended. Like, it might have actually been my fault the way I communicated. That's a harder path. And curiosity takes work, because you have to go, I don't know, but I want to learn. And maybe that means listening to somebody who says some things that make me really uncomfortable that I haven't considered or whatever. And that requires me to use parts of my brain that, what do you say to that? Because you can't just like will your way into that. But I feel like there is something about, you have to make a conscious decision to do it. It's like exercise. If you go once and then go, wow, I'm sore, that lactic acid just wrecked me, like never doing that again. That's the path of least resistance, and it's the path we often take.
It absolutely is the path we often take. So
because your whole book is on this. It's like, what is the brain science behind it? So how do we do it? Because if we keep going, boy, it's bad, we're screwed.
No, it's funny you say that, because I background of the book is that I started speaking on this topic, and the book is laid out very differently from how I speak about it. But I usually would talk about the barriers first, and then I would end that and be like, that sounds horrible, doesn't it? Like, acknowledging, like, okay, it sounds like we're like built to not do this thing, but we need to do the thing. And so to your original question, I think it's around, how do leaders, create spaces where there is some safety to go into these motions of, being able to challenge and being able to be wrong and being able to actually have to go and think through something and have that time and space. I think that's where we land in a really difficult spot right now, is because there is no time and there is no space. And so to your point, we're choosing the path of least resistance. But if you think about that resistance and the natural ways that we resist, it's things like energy usage and habits. Is it easier to do what we always do? Is it harder to learn something new or do something new? Well, we'll default to what's easier, right? If it's protection, it's like, is that a threatening thought? Is that something that threatens what I know to be true? Is that something that threatens my livability? Is that, create a space where I'm stuck in an ambiguous situation? All of those things are what drive that natural resistance. So as leaders, as people who are trying to lead others to still utilize this agency that we have to think and be creative, the very first thing is acknowledging the need for some of this stuff. One, acknowledge that we need to challenge, that we actually need to take the time to say, hey, I don't agree. Talk me through why you think that, and walk me through that. Where's that based? What are we coming to that from? Where were the sources here? And that doesn't mean, kind of to your earlier point, that we go into everything and be like, did you use AI? If you used AI, I need the 85 pages of source documents to make sure that you did this correctly. That's not what we need. What we need is, to your point, asking the good questions. Like, where did we base this off of? Is there a source that we're using? Whatever that is. But that safety, and we've talked about this a lot in the last decade, the safety, that psychological safety around being able to challenge, being able to bring ideas, being able to say, I like where you're going with that, but have you thought about X? Those are the conversations that need to be had in the moments of, you know, your team coming together and going through this. The other thing is, if you are positioning the work as if there is no time, there is no space, well, then anything that comes at a person that's going to take time and space is now threatening. Because in their minds, what happens is, I'm already overburdened. I'm saying I'm running at 110% of my capacity, and that's the expectation of me, and I have to keep going with that because all the things on my list are important, and I've been told that that's what we need to execute. Okay, well then throw in one more thing, and I'm like, that's a threat to my ability to do all of this because I'm already overburdened. And so that creates that resistance, to your point. And then we go down the path of least resistance because we're like, how do I just get this off my plate quickly? Do I need to do anything else? I'll just put it into AI.
Well, and you know, the thing about this is, and this is a big part of a lot of the advisory work I do, is that there can be, and I don't like, I mean, it's always been a problem, but I feel like in many cases, we're almost celebrating this now. This almost kind of like artificial toughness and machismo, where it's like, you know, we say psychological safety and that's dumb. That's squishy. And you're like, okay, no, it's not. And it's about business and the way people operate. And if you go, I don't operate that way. Actually, yes, you do. Like biologically, you do. You can think that's wussy to be that way, but it doesn't change the fact that's the way your body works. Like when you are stretched too thin, when you are in an environment that is not safe, you don't operate well. And I mean, that's one of the things.
Have literally, let me reach back here. This person, Brene Brown, admits that her whole point of research was to prove that you don't need to be vulnerable to be a great leader. Right. And it proved the opposite. It proved that it's required for leadership.
Yes.
So like the person who wanted it to be the most not true actually proved it was, right? So it's a true area.
And I think that just goes back to it, is these things like creating psychological safety for your team. If you're somebody who reacts to that because you go, well, that just sounds like wussy. I hired people to come in and just do their work. You're like, exactly. This is the fight we're trying to fight, is that if people don't feel like they're in an environment where they can say, hey, I'm concerned about what we're doing because what we're doing is going to have unintended consequences. And I know that because I've done this before, but they can't say that because they'll get backhanded. You know, it's about, yes, caring about people, but it's also about caring about business outcomes. And I feel like one of the things that gets missed a lot in these conversations is we treat taking care of people like it's in competition with business performance.
Yes.
And it drives me nuts because I'm like, these things are not in competition with each other. Creating healthy spaces for people to thrive, taking care of people, making sure they have space, not overburdening them, you know, making sure that they can challenge things and have the freedom to take care of the things that are at their lowest level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, paying them well. Like this drives performance. But people are like, nope, because see, if I can just cut more out of the system, if I can just, you know, whack people over the head, then they do what I want. And you're like, but it's not actually driving high performance. It's only driving high performance because you don't have a standard of performance. You have a standard of an extension of myself and what I want to see. And that's a terrible standard to have. And unfortunately, I feel like we've propped that up as that's the apex of success. Success is when I go around and everybody tells me I'm the smartest person in the room and whatever I say happens. That's success. I would say that's hell on earth. Like that is not an environment that is actually successful. And it's almost like we've gotten that wrong. And because of that, all these other things keep compounding. And then AI comes in and it just accelerates and amplifies. I say it's the greatest amplifier we have ever seen in human history. And that can be really great, or it can be really, really terrible if we refuse to address some of these fundamental things.
Yeah, I absolute agreement on that. I think like the part that's interesting to me about all of this and everything that we're talking about is that competition that we feel between being there for our teams and supporting our teams at a human level and productivity and results and success. Though, like you said, those two things are not in competition. And what's interesting, so when I first started talking about this concept of neuroscience and how we can use it as leaders and bringing it into the business kind of world, because it's very separate, right? Like it was very separate. And I got a lot of weird looks when I started saying, hey, neuroscience is actually something that could help us understand how we be better leaders and how we lead better change. And people are like, yeah, that seems really scientific and we're not really interested in that. But
this is the business world, Travis.
Yeah. Like, I mean, like, hey, I went through my own process of becoming. I mean, I was a psych and neuroscience background person. And I was like, I don't know, I don't think I want to do that. So I'll go into business, thinking that they were completely separate things, which then converged later on in my path. Well, pretty quickly in my path. But anyway, long story short, they go nicely together. But when I started talking about this, I was at a conference and I was talking about these kind of neurological barriers and how actually what they do is they provide support and they build a culture that consistently will create better well-being for our people. And this was in particular an HR and benefits conference. And the question I got afterwards was, so what program should we be offering for people that, like, what support and what benefits should we be offering people knowing that they're in these states of kind of resistance all the time and threat all the time and things like that. And I probably, in my moment of being a little too candid, which Chris, you've known me a long time, that happens from time to time. I said, well, I would first start by not breaking them, and then you don't have to fix them. And I think everyone looked at me like, did he just say that? Because everyone in there was like a benefits person who focuses on employee benefits. But the reality is that by not breaking the person, you don't have to actually deal with the things that happen that make managing people and make business difficult. It's things like people who have horrible mental health who need to take leaves of absence to get back on a better path. It's things like the level of stress creating actual physical illness that requires them to miss work, to not be able to show up at their best, to not feel their best, to not do their best work. It's the things of that support so that the minute something happens, the whole organization doesn't go into an absolute productivity plunge because they're too busy determining whether or not they're in a threat of existence in that moment. These are things that if you can build culture around this idea that by treating people well and doing what's right for people, they actually will perform. I mean, the research is there. You just have to look at it.
Well, and I think that's, because I've not only been on the advising from the outside side, but I've run teams for years. And it's one of these things where there's a lot of these things, we're always afraid of the what ifs. And we tend to think very negatively of people, like, well, but if we take care of them, they're going to take advantage of that. And it's like, well, I mean, they might. Most people probably won't in general, because most people just want to do a good job. Most people won't. Will some? Sure. But if you actually establish accountability, they won't, because people who take advantage of it will be held accountable. So it's not that hard, to say, well, here's what's expected of you. And so if you don't do that, there will be consequences. But if you do, I'm here to do that. And I can't tell you how many times, because when people argue with me on this, I'm like, I've done it. And believe me, it doesn't work the way you think. Because with my teams, I'd be like, let's make sure you have a side hustle. And it was like, wait, what? Like, I can't talk to my boss about a side hustle. And I'm like, well, actually you can, because I have experience. Like, let's talk about this. Well, isn't that competing with my job? not if you're good at what you do, because it's probably making you better and it's adding to your layer of social or psychological security, because you're not afraid of what happens if something happens to my job, which might be out of my control. Even like you feel like you have more autonomy. Let's talk about what it really looks like for, some leaders hear the word flexibility and they freak out. And it's like, that might just mean somebody needs to know if their kid gets sick, they can go home. It might be as simple as that, or they can change their shift. But we assume that somebody wants that, and we go, yeah, that just means they want to go work on a beach all day and not do their job. And you're like, nobody does it. People they like the work they do if they have an environment they thrive in. But it's one of those things that when we hold on to these beliefs that really everybody out there is just trying to scam the system, you're missing huge opportunities. And my experience has been usually the people who are most skeptical at that are the ones who are notoriously doing that. The ones who are like, everybody's out there trying to screw you and everybody's out there trying to scam things and do the least amount of work for the most gain possible. You're like, are you projecting?
Are you afraid everyone else figured out what you figured out?
Right. Are you afraid they're going to do what you do? Is that why you're so insecure about this?
That's funny. It's interesting because I was talking about this and this is especially true in tech. Pre-COVID, we actually had probably more flexibility than we do post-COVID in how we show up at work. And it wasn't because anyone mandated that people were in the office 4 days a week. People just came into the office because one, they wanted to, or two, it was worthwhile. But also they knew that on those days that, to your point, hey, my kids got early out of school, I'm just going to work from home because it's easier for me to run and grab them. It's a 10-minute if I'm from home and it's a 40-minute if I'm from work. That flexibility was just kind of inherently there. And then afterwards, we've mandated, it's got to be so many days in office. It's got to be Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It can't be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. It's got to be these specific days. Like, we've created more barriers to flexibility than we ever have. And I would argue no one was really upset before on how people were being flexible. So we're kind of solving a problem that I don't know that it really existed that much, but it just,
which kind of goes back to what we said, which is we look for activity to validate that we're doing something effective. And so when companies aren't doing well, we're like, I know what the problem is. It's because we haven't mandated an in-office policy. So let's enact that and roll that out. And then we can feel better about ourselves because now we've forced people to do something and we see that as accomplishment instead of doing the hard work of going, why are things not working the way we intended? Why are they still broken? It's a lot easier to roll out a policy and then go there.
Absolutely.
We did it. And ChatGPT wrote it for us. So it was wonderful.
and we feel really good about ourselves, right? Like solve the problem.
Right. We solved the problem. We did a thing. Yeah. It's, it's funny you bring up the COVID thing because it was interesting to watch how, like you said, things were actually pretty flexible. Then they went haywire because they had to. But then there were a number of people, I wasn't one of them, but there were a number of people who were like, you know what, I kind of actually need that environment, or I need to get back to that, or I need some sense of, routine. And so there was this almost natural desire that created some of this stuff. And then it's like we ruined it because we were like, wow, it's actually kind of going back to a healthy state. And people were like, but not healthy enough because they didn't do it because we told them to. So I know what we need to do. We need to enact a compliance policy so that we can, and it's just like, why do we do this crap? I sometimes struggle to understand why we do it. And I don't know if maybe you've cracked that code in your book of like why leaders sometimes do this, where it's like, why do you solve problems that don't exist that only make things worse? It's a very fascinating thing.
I can tell you, I don't crack that one in the book because I think I would love to know the answer to that in many cases. But I think like what it boils down to, and I do talk about this in the book, is leaders, and we talked about ego a little bit, and I always get a lot of pushback when I talk about ego because people don't like talking about ego. But here's the reality.
Nobody thinks they have it. Like,
right.
I'm not.
Here's the reality of ego.
I don't have it. I am super humble. Humblest person I know.
So ego is a spectrum, right? There is a level of ego that is obviously unacceptable, that people don't particularly love. But in order to be a leader, it requires some level of ego. You have to have a belief in yourself. You have to believe in yourself enough that you can get people to get on board with you and like actually follow you and believe that your vision and your way of moving forward is the right way. Like, this is all ego driven. Like, this isn't just like, hey, I just decided today that I'm going to try to get people to do something. Like, there has to be a little bit of ego in that. And what happens a lot of times, especially when we're going through large change and transformation, is that leaders come to that moment of announcement or moment of sharing, and they say, all right, I'm ready. I've got to come with my pitch. This has to be the greatest pitch. It's got to get everyone riled up and rah and excited. And the reality of how people actually react to change is that it's immediate, almost immediate resistance and kind of lean back. They don't lean in to it right away, right? And so, and that's that natural resistance. And so what happens when leaders get into these moments where they're kind of expecting either some kind of accolade or some kind of like movement with them, that ego takes over when it doesn't happen and says, well, is it me? And do they not trust me? And then it gets very much to their kind of their core of their, psyche, identity, of their belief system, where it's like, oh man, like, I don't think they're with me. I don't think they're here. I don't think they believe it. And I wonder if that's part of what happened with a bit of the return to office, where leaders were like, the offices are open. And I think they expected people to like run back to them as if they were the place that they really loved going. And And I'm not saying that it wasn't, because quite frankly, I mean, during that time I worked at Google, and Google had amazing offices, and I loved going to the office, and I loved the people interactions. But again, that's a change that has to get kind of slowly brought into your day-to-day when you've been years
it's a fair point.
Like, so I think leaders expected people to like jump at it and be like, yes, the office is open, and it didn't. And then they defaulted to, well, we got to push harder. We got to be more authoritarian. We got to get people to follow this. We got to do that. And I wonder if that's a little bit of what was happening, because that's what I talk about a lot.
Yeah, and this comes full circle to something we talked about before, which is we often are looking for these big, dopamine rushes, the morphine hit of like, okay, I did a good thing, a great thing. Like, I want a standing ovation and everybody to embrace the change and do all this. And that's not the case. And I can even just say that, like, when I've taken on new organizations, and I'm like, hey, like, I want to support your side hustle. I want you to challenge things. People aren't just like, great, let me tell you how it is and let me do this. Like, even when it's a genuine, honest thing, they're like, yeah, right, I heard that before. Like, the last boss who told me, tell me what they think, ended up putting me on a PIP 3 weeks later. And it takes a long time for people to kind of go, well, I need to see somebody else do it first. I need to start to actually believe that this is real before I'll do that. And to your point, I think if you're not careful as a leader, you can go, oh, I've, you know what? Well, I'm much more comfortable if I just scream and yell at them, because then they do it. Then they do it. And I can feel better that they did do what I said. And so, we're complicated things. And I think, one of the themes that's come throughout this, and I think this is probably also tied to what we originally talked about with this whole AI thing, is things take time, and they often happen in slower, smaller steps than we would like them to. And we're really uncomfortable with that. We want to just get to the end. We want the morphine rush. We want everything to go. And it's like, but that's not how the world works. You don't roll out AI and magically performance gains. I recorded my podcast for next week and just talked about this IKEA thing that happened recently. It was a really good example of doing AI right. But I'm like, this took years. This wasn't, they flipped on Copilot or Gemini, and the next quarter they had $1.5 billion in gains. It's not the way it works. And I think that delayed satisfaction is hard on our brains, but it's essential.
It is essential. And I think we could talk a whole nother session about just the way that AI is being rolled out at companies. But, intention is extremely important in corporate and work settings. And, I think we've riffed about this a little bit, but the way that organizations are bringing AI into them and expecting results is to basically just give them all the tools and say, figure it out, like use what works for you, find the efficiency. But the fact of the matter is that people don't gather around efficiency as something that they're like, oh, I'm going to find it. It has to have a purposeful, meaningful direction and vision for people to be able to come together to find solution. And you don't as a singular person find a movement of efficiency through AI.
No,
it's a group of people coming together to solve a problem. And I think the IKEA example is a great one where over years, it was really a company that was trying to solve a problem. And there were probably large numbers of people coming together to do that. And that's how you make movement. It's not every single person trying to figure out what it means for them. It is an organization figuring out, how do we leverage this thing to make meaningful change at this organization? And that's how organizations move. It's, we are huge tanker ships. It's not every single person running around trying to get the thing to move. No. If every single person pushes it in a different direction, it doesn't move, right? But if every single person goes the same direction, it can move it.
Yep. I think, and then you can plug your book and then we'll wrap here. But I think it also goes back to, and if people haven't figured this out yet, you don't get AI results by rolling out AI mandates and telling everybody you better be doing it and maxing out your tokens or else, because that's also a terrible way. And if you're not convinced of that, read my last 2 weeks of articles. But this has been awesome. I'm so glad you joined me today, Travis. This is a great conversation that I think hopefully helps not only connect the dots between business and people, but also just helps people better understand the complexity of what this is, and to lean into that complexity with curiosity and a little bit of hubris so that you're confident, but you don't need to be a blowhard. So before we go, when's your book launch? Where can people find it? And then we'll do our launch event next week.
Yeah. So book launch is June 23rd, Rethink Resistance, Embracing Neuroscience to Lead Transformational Change. It is a book, field guide, glass of wine with a friend who's been there, who's seen it all, and has seen the good and the bad, and isn't afraid to tell you the honest truth. And I hope that it is a book that you can lean on as a leader who's driving change, and something that's truly applicable within your day-to-day and gives you tools and things that you can actually look back on and say, hey, let's try this and see what's different. So that launches on June 23rd, next Tuesday. And the great Chris is going to join me for a launch event that day. So please join us.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody who joined. Keith, thanks for your comments. And those of you who also added into the discussion, I hope you found it helpful. And I will be back. It'll probably be 2 weeks unless something else. Well, no, we'll be doing the launch event next week. So we got that. And then keep an eye out for the Substack article, because next week I'm going to talk more about this agency, because the risk is real and the consequences are as well. So with that, have a great Friday, and we'll see you on the other side.